And it is another edition of Licorice Pizza. Yes. And I am Don Despa, of course, the host of this program. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, okay, to the show. It's a special one tonight. This has been in the works for months. A group called the Beatles. You might have heard of them, John, Paul, George, and Ringo. So, and with me is a special co-host on the program, Mr. Dave Cohen. Dave, it's great to have you along.
It is an honor to be part of the show, talking about probably my favorite band. So I'm really excited.
That makes me feel a lot better. Me too. So, anyway, Dave, it's a little background about yourself.
Sure. So I grew up just about 45 minutes north of New York City, in the Hudson Valley. Yep. I am a lifelong lover of music. I spent about 13 years in radio, and I love pop culture. And I came up to the North Country following a job. Currently I actually do a lot of community work with a local credit union, Seacom Federal Credit Union, right. And do some marketing with them. But I love music, and this opportunity came up. Thank you for inviting me, and I thought it was just going to be a lot of fun.
Wow, yes, it will be. I think we're just going to start. I was thinking about starting with the Beatles back in '62. I said, you know what? No, scrap it. Anywhere you can start with this band. We'll get to that probably, or over here, or 69, 70. But let me ask you first, Dave, how old were you, and what turned you on to the Beatles?
Well, I definitely have to thank my parents for, introducing me to a lot of great music. In fact, what I have here, and, I'm sure we'll talk about it later, I actually have my mom's
I've got this
album.
Baby. Oh my God. Love it.
Mom's album, Meet the Beatles.
Yeah.
And it's the first album I ever heard of the Beatles.
Me too.
So it's just, it played in my home, watching when I was a kid, when, like VH1, the TV channel, actually played music and music videos.
I know. I remember those days.
I would hear Beatles and see Beatles there. So definitely, my family, and just, I think media really, helped me appreciate the Beatles. And then as I got older, I discovered, a lot more of their music.
Yeah, Meet the Beatles was my first introduction. Second, third grade, some way back. But I looked at these guys. It's hard for people that aren't into the Beatles or never heard of them. There are a few people, but I would literally stare at the back of the album that shows the four of them, and it's got all that stuff written down like they're gods, because it meant so much to me. Meet the Beatles, a very important album in rock history, because the Beatles were different. I mean, back then you had, Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, great group, all those bands. But the Beatles were four guys, all played their instruments and wrote a lot of most of their own stuff, especially later on in their career. But yeah, they were just so different. The hair, just the everything about them. The sound was different. Crazy. But Meet the Beatles, that was it. Very important album, yeah. And Dave, of course, that big day in Beatle history, February 9th, 1964, the Ed Sullivan Show, and that was a game changer. That changed everything for that band. 73 million people in 64 watched that show, and the director of the Ed Sullivan Show said he never heard, or even Ed Sullivan said that it was just mayhem. 50,000 requests for tickets, and 725 seats. And you know who got the tickets, right?
Of course.
Producers, Walter Cronkite, his two daughters got tickets. Yeah, so, but after that, everything changed here. They knew to really make it huge, they needed America, make it in this country. So that's what.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, they had the right imagery. There's the famous shot on the Ed Sullivan Show, but they also have the famous shots coming off the plane. They have
I remember. Yeah.
they have the press conferences.
Yeah.
I think there was a conference right at the airport at the terminal, and they had like the Pan Am sign behind them.
Crazy. Yeah.
So you have this phenomenon of these four guys, and I also want everybody to remember that I believe John was the oldest, or Ringo was the oldest.
Yeah.
At they were 24. Okay, so 24 and below. All right, and they're already there.
I know. Talk about maturity, how they handled that. I mean, I don't think people realize Beatlemania when it first came here, how intense it was. I know when they toured in '64, Adelaide, Australia, 350,000 people in the town square and on the streets. Now, they didn't perform. They came down like as a parade, like they had for them. Went to the hotel, and they had no school that day in Adelaide. I mean, 350,000 people. You're like 50,000 short of Woodstock, just to see the Beatles. It was, and they were huge in Australia. Man, they were like real big. And they toured A Hard Day's Night as from '64. And they lived the life where they couldn't, I mean, rush and they had a press conference, I believe, just before every concert. The media was all there and everything in '64. And speaking of '64, then the movie Hard Day's Night come out. What do you think of Hard Day's Night? I'll ask you.
It's a lot of fun. I think it's a little campy, which is kind of nice. I think it gives, it definitely lightens up their extreme rush. But I thought that it did a good job of showing, at that point they were still young enough. It was still early enough in their careers, and they were still all buddies. They were friends. They were just a group of guys who were doing what they loved. It was hectic. They had a lot of stuff going on, but just like I love the sound check scenes where they just they just go in and they just start playing and fooling around with each other. So I think I think it's a great movie. I think it's a lot of fun. If you haven't seen it and you're a Beatles fan, you should definitely check it out. But I definitely think I like A Hard Day's Night better than Help.
I do too. I agree. Yeah, I think Hard Day's Night, they were just being the Beatles. They didn't have to act.
Right.
And it just showed, you're right, it just, it showed that time period, how it was right to a T. They're very witty, they're great with the press. They always had a quick answer, the Beatles did. And '64, of course, the Hollywood Bowl show, all over. They toured like all over the world. And then we enter early '65 too. Then there's more changes. See, they like you were saying earlier, the evolution, it just kept evolving. Amazing how quick it was, Their first album, wasn't it? Let me see. Beatles '65, I think, the American version. I think that was their first album in '65 here in the States. And then the next album, then it might have been, I don't know, Help maybe. But they were busy in '65. But Rubber Soul, I think we really heard how big difference I found in their sound on Rubber Soul.
Definitely.
Norwegian Wood, Michelle, Run for Your Life. I think that was banned by some radio stations.
I can understand that. It's a pretty morbid.
It is. It's pretty brutal, that thing.
But like going back to in that time period with their touring, the big, I think the big milestone in their touring has to be their show at Shea
Stadium, definitely.
And they after the show they were like, we can't do this anymore. We can't hear ourselves. It was so loud. The equipment was
they used the PA for the microphone that for the announcer at the games to the crowd. That's how bad it was, and they had no monitors. No monitor
So
to hear them singing, or
yeah, so they couldn't hear themselves. Then finally, they end their touring at Candlestick Park in San Francisco,
yeah.
and then they're like, we're not doing it ever again.
Yeah, and they
No
didn't
touring.
announce that before. They just that was it.
Yeah,
Somewhere,
they just stopped.
and they had to. It was, 65 Shea Stadium. Uh, it was so loud that Ringo said Ringo would watch the way George was moving, or John, to see where he's playing at, so they didn't get all messed up because the screaming was so intense. And then at 65 and Help, and the Beatles are peaking, Beatlemania, and now if you get the 1966, man, oh my Lord, John's comments about we're bigger than, not, he said we mean more the kids than Jesus Christ. I think he said people misinterpret that. My opinion about all that is they people still to this day can't, they don't like John Lennon or the Beatles because of that comment. And John said, we didn't say we're bigger or better or anything like that. We just said what John said was a fact. Yeah, we mean more to kids, and it got all, and man, things went downhill. Of course, the Philippines too.
Yep.
They barely made it out of there alive.
Yeah, so you have the the album burnings, and the DJs saying we're not playing the Beatles anymore.
That's right.
So not only was it hard to hear themselves on stage and to tour, but it was dangerous.
Yeah,
and in the mid '60s. You're still at a very radical time period where there's a lot of anger and a lot of stuff going on that doesn't even have to do with music. So you add that kind of anger that people have, and just to something so passionate. You really, they really were like, we can't go out in public anymore.
No. It was the end. Like George Harrison, the anthology series on the DVD set that I haven't watched. He said people were blaming us for everything. He said we're just musicians. And he said it got so crazy. He said we're just tired of nobody can hear us when we play live anyway. So what's the point? So but yeah, they had to quit touring. 66. Revolver, Paperback Writer, Rain. Another big year. Then and a lot of people thought after John Lennon's comments after 66, I remember, they're finished now. I remember people saying that, Beatles now, they're done. And and then, they're done. Well, something happened in 67 called Sergeant Pepper's. To me, oh my God, I think, Dave, they gained a whole new fan base. Sergeant Pepper, more mature. It wasn't just the 13, 14-year-old girls anymore. The Monkees kind of turned into the early Beatles when they came in.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so.
Yeah. So the Beatles just gained. And I remember watching a clip from Dick Clark's American Bandstand when it was on originally, and they played the video to Strawberry Fields Forever. And a lot of girls that used to like the Beatles said, oh, that's so weird. I don't like it. They were into the Monkees, but a lot of the guys in the audience said, that's really different. See, they just progressed up to a different audience, maybe more mature audience. I don't know.
Yeah, and I also think that I think that the country itself was growing up.
Oh man,
and the world was growing up.
Yeah.
You have escalation with the Vietnam War. And I think that a lot of attitudes were changing. These kids, right out of high school are getting drafted and going off to war. So you're growing up. You have kids that are growing up. And when the Beatles kind of, had the different influences from their own personal lives, whether it was their trip to India, and their influence, with other artists, and also being able to, not having to tour again, to actually spend time in the studio and write and produce and sit with George Martin. So that 66, 67, you have a lot of personal change, not just with the Beatles but with the world. So I think that their music evolved
absolutely
with the times.
Yes, it did. Yeah, and where other bands didn't. I don't think I don't know if they just didn't know how. The Beatles were so unique in that way, and then of course Magical Mystery Tour that year.
Yep.
Penny Lane, Strawberry Fields, I Am the Walrus. Love that song. Fool in the Hills. So many great songs off that album. I mean, my goodness. And then 67, you're right, boy. That was man, they call it the summer of love. Well, maybe a little bit, but yeah, there was a lot of issues. And then we go on to 1968, and that then they come out with Hey Jude. I think that was their biggest hit ever.
Hey Jude. Hey Jude spent, I think, more time at number one than any other other Beatles hit, which is really interesting. Hey Jude used to be my favorite Beatles song when I was a kid. Seeing, I think it was on maybe it was the Smothers Brothers show, or they had that live studio performance. And I used to love watching that. And what I love about Hey Jude is that it's like a 6 minute and 10-second song where half of it is nah.
I know. There's not much to it, but it's so resonates.
Yeah,
so catchy. Yeah, it's got those hooks in it. I remember hearing Hey Jude for the first time on the radio in my mother's car, and just going nuts. I bought the little 45 and played it outside on the porch, and when we was kids, we just crank it over and over and over. And Hey Jude, you're right. And radio frowned upon. They still do to a point. They don't like those long songs like that. They want to squeeze more tunes in within that hour. But Hey Jude. So it's Hey Jude but it's no longer your favorite Beatles.
I love Hey Jude. I always will. It's probably my favorite song to watch Paul McCartney, perform live at concerts, just because the crowd can get into it. It's definitely a crowd pleaser. But it is no longer my favorite Beatles song.
Yeah. So did you see McCartney live or?
No. Oh, I wish.
I wish. I did 93 Toronto.
It must have been amazing.
It was. And you're right about Hey Jude. When he comes out, it's more like an event, at Exhibition Stadium, about 60,000 there at that thing. And we're, back quite a ways, but he's got the big screens. It was a great show. Paul McCartney. So then what else happened in 68? Oh, the flip side of Hey Jude, Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
The thing about Beatles A/B sides, it was unheard of back then that to have both. You had your A side, okay, that's the hit. The flip side, nobody listened to. With the Beatles, it was different. Both sides of the record were Act Naturally. That's another thing I forgot to mention. When it wasn't hip to do country music in the mid '60s for a rock band, it just like they kind of frowned upon it. The Beatles were doing country music too. So variety just all over the place. Yeah, Act Naturally. That was the flip side, I think, Yesterday. Yesterday's been recorded, I think, by more artists than any song in history. I believe so.
Yep, I believe that too. Yeah.
Yeah, that and we're on to so we're in 68 now. And then that one of my favorite, that Double White album. Love that. They came out. They knew how to plan it. They had November, I think it was, around Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
They come out with the double album. They're just plain the White Album. I still have. I've got about 3 copies of that original.
Oh man.
Yeah, I did. I spent a lot of money on that stuff. Jeez, I had to have any Beatle record. I didn't care. I buy a double, buy another one, but. Yeah, the White Album I received Christmas '68, and man, I think I'll never forget that Christmas. The Beatles were. It's hard to explain if you're not a huge Beatles fan. Just to hold that album, I I think I slept with it overnight. My arms, I just listened to it. You go to school and I can't concentrate in school because I got to go listen to that album when I get home. That's all I thought about. The Beatles, it's like, oh, crazy. So now, do you have the White Album on CDs or album vinyl?
No, I had that album on CDs, so I burned them and put them on my
Yeah,
on my MP3. So like I have the whole album. I
right.
do.
Yeah,
But I don't have a physical copy of
right.
them. Nope. I've got actually I think you said Abbey Road was your favorite.
Yeah, if I had to pick one album, I'd have to pick, I think, Abbey Road. That to me, the Abbey Road album from '69 was all of them just together. Actually, that was recorded after the Let It Be album. Abbey Road was, yeah. Uh, January, January, the rooftop concert. That's all the Let It Be sessions. Then George Martin's, because they weren't getting along at that
Right.
time at all. He said, "Well, you guys please sit down and maybe just get together and one last time because of all the money problems they were. I mean, they had millions of dollars floating around and nobody knew where it was. Crazy because they weren't business people then,
Right.
at all. Because I think George asked, "Geez, what do we really have?" And it looked, I don't know. They said, "They have no idea. We just charge everything and buy what we want," but they had no idea about finances. Yeah, and then we enter '69, of course, John and Yoko. Everything's about John and Yoko that year. In 1969, the bed in.
Yep.
I think everybody kind of saw the writing on the wall of breakups, is forthcoming.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And of course, externally, you see John and Yoko. And so many people blame Yoko for the breakup of the Beatles.
Right.
I don't. I don't really
no.
Yoko for the breakup of the Beatles. I think I love Paul McCartney. I do, but I mean the man had an ego. He really did. He had and if you saw the sessions that I mean I think you can actually find them now. Yeah, I think you can actually find them on Max, I think, or some kind of streaming service.
But he was he could be a little bit, to me, bossy.
Yeah.
And going around, and that's when George kind of put his head down. He walked out and he said, "I quit."
Yeah.
During that session, John the whole thing, man, was, oh my goodness. Yeah. He wanted to, was very controlling, and George, I want to play this way, and I'll play what you want. It was getting, the Get Back sessions, boy, oh boy, that's something have you seen that yet, Dave? Or
yes, yeah. I've I watched the Get Back sessions. I love that they were able to do that to get inside the how they recorded. Just seeing the process. The fact that's so much, so much brilliance just came out of jamming. They really just jammed. But Paul would come in with an idea and play a little bit on the guitar and start singing. And then he'd go to the piano.
Crazy.
And just he'd be like, the words weren't even there, but the melody was there. And just seeing that process, but also seeing the frustration. I mean, to be 100% honest with you, George Harrison is and forever will be my favorite Beatle.
Mine too. I can't believe you said that. Mine too.
I think that George had the far superior solo career afterwards. I think that he was the most creative, not in the popular sense, because I mean, John and Paul is one of the greatest, writing duos of all time.
Yeah.
George Harrison, to me, was the best individual writer. Right. And I think that, post Beatles, I think his career far surpassed, writing wise, I think far surpassed all of them.
Right.
Now, if John had lived post 1980, would that have been different? I'm not sure. Double Fantasy was a really good album.
Yeah, fabulous.
So, to me, seeing George's frustration and knowing, in hindsight, how much talent and how much creativity he really had,
They didn't give him enough
is just amazing.
Yeah, when he was with the Beatles, he really broke through. While My Guitar Gently Weeps, Here Comes the Sun, Something, probably the three best songs they ever recorded.
Yeah,
those songs by Harrison. Then he had the Dave #1 album, well, triple album, All Things Must Pass. I have that original set. Amazing album, absolutely incredible. Isn't it a pity, my sweet Lord? Beware of Darkness is on that one. When George passed away, he was my favorite Beatle. I have all his solo stuff.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So towards the end, 1969, 1970, I think that George is, because there's so much inner turmoil, I think that it actually gave George an opportunity to showcase what he was writing. And they were eventually like, you know what, let's put it on the albums,
right?
Yep. And I think that it really proved how great George Harrison was.
Yeah. In the early years, they really didn't give him much. I think he had a song on an album or two songs at the most, but didn't really let him shine till later on a little bit, like an Abbey Road with Something and Here Comes the Sun, and then Let It Be comes out in 1970 around, I don't know, April or May. Let It Be comes out also, but yeah, when they recorded the Let It Be sessions on that Get Back, it is amazing how they wrote. All sitting down here said, how can that be a song? McCartney's playing the bass here like a rhythm guitar with like writing Get Back. And it showed how it morphed into that amazing, how that writing. And then the rooftop concert, darn it. I wanted to see them. They had all kinds of plans to play here and there, but they chose the building that they owned, play on the roof, So and that was good. Also, that's in the Get Back. I think Disney Plus have that on right now.
Yes, it's Disney Plus. Yep,
Disney Plus. But the rooftop concerts, they sounded great too for being like 32 degrees. Miserable day. It's raining. It's January. Oh my goodness. But you could tell the writing was on the wall, and then rumors. And then I remember when they did break up in '70 officially. But you're right when you brought up Yoko. I think they had so many. They have been together for so long. They needed time apart, and all the bickering about money was a big one.
Yeah,
and Klein was their manager, and Paul wanted a different manager for the Beatles, and all this money floating around. They said they were getting like things stolen out of the recording studio. People just carrying the stuff out, just ripping them off.